This was when Chicago violence was like at its height. It was huge. And it was huge in Inglewood, which is the neighborhood I came from. And around that time, I was doing ministry there with my husband, like a lot of street evangelism and building with families and youth. And at the time, I'm like, man, there are churches. I'm a part of the church, a part of the Christian church, the church at large, the body of Christ. There are churches on every corner in a lot of these neighborhoods where a lot of this is happening. And why isn't there any engagement with, believers being salt and light and really pouring into families and people in these communities? Because, a lot of these things are like right at your doorstep, and it's like, how can you ignore that? And so while you were sleeping was a wake up call for me.
Lordy, we like to party, the party, the party. We like to party.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Personal Pizza Party Show, episode running through the 6 with my no. I'm Jada, your host, the creative Chicago native who pizza. For today's guest, we have a real Chi-Town native in the building. Not really though, cause Ronna. She is straight out of Inglewood. Rapper, musician, speaker, Aasha Marie. Aasha is an artist who I feel like really knits who she is into her artistry in a very authentic way. She is all about God, her community, and of course, the music. In fact, she released her debut album, While You Were Sleeping, earlier this year in the middle of a global pandemic. That's dedication, y'all. The album has all the vibes, very jazzy. She's very poetic in her lyricism, and I love it. But you can see how she coming for yourself. Check this out.
Don't look at me, look at my master. I'm looking dapper, you should see my before and after. Can you dig it? Don't look at me, look at my master. I'm looking dapper, you should see my before and after. Hoes make the man when they're made by the man's hand. I make for man, but I make men see God's plan. Christ can do away with a W Drake. He don't play, dragging dragons away. My new digs bring a grave danger. If I don't hang him up and leave him on that great hanger, who took a vertical beating, hung his cervical pleasing, who God is merciful keeping, kept us from terminal heat and check my liturgical meaning.
Oh, that was Aasha on the mic. Chi-Town sister, got the sugar, got the spice. Before we hop into the conversation, gotta bring in my co-host, and we have yet
another one.
By the Screaming Sicilian, beer battered flavored crust with meatballs, red onions, and barbecue sauce, also with beer in it. A lot of beer happening. As always, go ahead, grab you a slice. This is episode 6 with Aasha Marie. Enjoy. So one thing I wanted to start with that I noticed, and I don't know if I missed the announcement. I feel like I may have seen it on IG, but I wanted to know, like, what's your label situation? And like, I see like ETR on your stuff, and how did that happen?
Yeah. So ETR stands for, so the street that I grew up on in West Inglewood. ETR is more of like a movement personally, and it represents Sons and Daughters of Chicago. It stands for Emmett Till Road. And the street I grew up on in West Inglewood, where I feel I really came of age, it stands for Emmett Till Road. So 71st Street is an honorary Emmett Till Road street. I feel like Emmett Till's story should never be forgotten, and it won't ever be forgotten because he was a son of Chicago. His life was snuffed out like so young. And I think it represents a lot of just even modern stories of like Black boys who just don't make it home. And it's always been significant for me. Eventually, I'll be rolling out like other like projects and things like that, kind of under that moniker, because it just means a lot to me. And again, my coming of age story kind of happened there. But I actually am. This is probably my first time sharing this. So my husband has a label. Shout out to Verbal Renaissance Recording. So it's an indie label situation. So I am signed to an indie label right now. We haven't formally rolled it out, but projects that I'll be releasing from here on out will be released under that name. So yes, indie label. But eventually, we definitely want to do like a partnership with like a bigger label, like to get a distribution deal. So that's something that we're looking into and kind of praying about. So right now, just indie.
ETR is basically your kind of production company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything pretty much that I do that's tied to like, it's very Chicago focused and Chicago centered. I think Chicago has a unique story. I'm very, very, very pro Chicago and pro Black. I think Chicago has such a unique story and a unique history. When I think about like the Great Migration, even my family's history and all the things that make Chicago uniquely, Chi-Town, it's just an important story that I think should be told. And yeah, I think just a lot of the stories, and when I just think about my worldview, how it was shaped, the things that I'm passionate about, they were really forged in Inglewood and West Inglewood, which is where I grew up. I did spend some time in the West suburbs. Like I went to high school in the West suburbs. But I spent the majority of my life in Inglewood and West Inglewood, and it's just so significant. Just that story, and then growing up in that community and just kind of seeing like a lot of the pitfalls and the plight of African Americans. It's just like a whole story kind of tied to that eventually I want to tell on future albums. So I don't want to speak too much about it because there's like a lot kind of tied to it, but it definitely, there's going to be more coming out of that, like ETR Productions.
I want to definitely talk about your first album that you released this year in the midst of a global pandemic. Like, what was that like? Because I know you're not the only person that happened to, like, also Wanda released her album this year, and I'm sure like many others. Like, what was that like?
One, it was frustrating because I had planned a whole CD release. I was going to do 2 shows. And of course, the pandemic interrupted all of that. And I was devastated. I was actually kind of stressed because I was like, should I keep my release date? Because the world is just in such a disarray. Like, I just didn't know if people were going to pay attention to it or if it would be successful in the sense that people would know about it and like buy into it. So I was really fretful in the beginning. But then I realized, I mean, I had like wise counsel. I was talking to other friends who are artists and they were like, just keep going and keep pushing. It was a huge accomplishment for me because the last project I released was an EP, and that was in 2014. That was called Breaking Obscurity. And that was like, okay, I'm introducing myself. A lot of people don't know what I do, musically or artistically. And this was going to be like the first full-length project, so they get to hear all the different sides of Aasha, because the project is filled with just diverse ranges of music and like rap cadences, and I'm singing and I'm doing poetry. So it was a huge accomplishment, but it was also frustrating because a lot of the things I would have done with any, new artist, when you release an album, you have to perform. And I was just like, how am I going to perform now? I have these kind of roadblocks in the way. But then it forced me to get creative. So I did like 2 virtual shows. I plan on doing, Lord willing, 1 more later on this fall to do some more songs from the album and poetry, and maybe like some up and coming music too, unreleased music from a future project. But it just forced me to be more creative. But it was a huge accomplishment. Releasing an album, it takes a lot of like time and money and dedication to finish it and to make sure you're happy with the finished product and it's what you want. So it was challenging in the beginning with COVID, but at the end of the day, I'm extremely happy with the way it turned out. And I got a lot of good feedback from like a lot. So it was yeah, I'm proud of myself.
You should be. Absolutely. Like, I feel like to do an indie, like, and you like work a full-time job, like, I just want to encourage you with that. And during a pandemic, like, having the courage to do that and not wait until like now or even next year, like, yeah, like you did that. So
Thank you.
But you know that already. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned your live concert experience. I listened to like some of your other interviews, and you talked about performing a lot. And how you were influenced by just growing up in church and stuff, and how you love live instruments and whatnot, which brings me to the next question. So the While You Were Sleeping live concert experience, so what was it like organizing and coordinating that?
Oh yeah. I have a lot of friends who are musicians, and a lot of acquaintances and people that I know who are singers. And when I'm writing a song or putting something together, I already kind of have in mind like who I want to ask, who I want to work with. And I try to rotate musicians, because I kind of have two like main like keyboard like players. My husband usually is plays drums for me, and then I'll switch up like the bass player if I decide to use the bass player, and then guitarists and my background singers. It always brings me great joy in bringing that together and being able to say, okay, here are my ideas, and to have them translate that into a live experience. I try to, this whole time, like during COVID, I've been very strategic in my planning and kind of knowing what I want to do and how I want to, carry it out. And it gives me like joy just motivating them to say, even though this is my music and my album, like you are also performing this too, like you're a part of that experience. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I got to rewind it real quick. Totally in a good way. I like him like a lot. As an indie artist, I forgot to say that. But he's not from Chicago, but I really like him.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to live music, there's nothing like it. I feel like it just really makes it come to life. And then with rap, because rap is usually just like production, it's really hard sometimes to kind of give it to a musician and say, okay, translate this into like live. And I'm one of those artists where like usually a rapper would have like the backing track underneath and just have the band play on top of it. I don't like that, because I like to kind of force a musician to be creative and say, translate this into a whole live piece, like without relying on the track, because I want to hear your interpretation of it. And I just like the feel of live music just completely. So that brings me great joy. That's kind of like my kind of like my stomping grounds when it comes to like music and being a part of the arrangement process. I just love that whole process of bringing that together.
Yeah, and so one thing that I thought about as you were talking is like when you were creating the album, because I feel like, because I watched it just today, and I feel like it was, just the vibes and stuff. I really enjoyed it personally. But when you were creating the album, did you already have in mind that you would do a live show? So like,
oh yeah, for sure. Some, even on the album, I had some live instrumentation that I brought in to bring some stuff to life. Like, bass player, I had some additional keys and like organ sounds kind of added to some of the tracks. And I think with my music, I always try to envision that. Like, I think now I try to be intentional about picking production that will translate really well live, because I know eventually I'm going to perform this with a live band. Shout out to So Far at Sound Chicago. I've been performing with them for a while. I mean, we had to come to a halt because of COVID, but there's a total live experience. It's very stripped down and organic. So it really kind of inspired me and trained me to say, yeah, I can do this with just the band, and perform this rap music and make it really, cool and creative. So that's a huge part of my artistic process when it comes to, choosing production, and to say, man, these songs need to be able to translate well when it comes to a live setting with just pure instrumentation.
A lot of artists are doing virtual concerts and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, like just for other indie artists in the space and like similar to you, like what kind of advice would you give them in terms of like coordinating such a thing like that?
Yeah, plan. Be very strategic. Make sure it's what you want. No one else can interpret your vision like you. And when you're writing and creating your music, that's your baby. That comes from your heart. That comes from your soul. And it has to be what you want. And even if you have a big budget or a small budget, try to work with what you have, like make do with what you have, but make sure it's authentically you, like how you want to be represented. And make sure that you can connect with people that even if they don't understand it completely, because there are some ideas I presented to my band and singers, they're like, what? And they might think like it's crazy, but be willing to kind of link with people and work with people who can accommodate you, who believe in your vision and what you're doing. And I think it makes everything better, because again, like, no one's going to advocate for you better than you. Mm-hmm. No one is going to really push for your ideas and your voice and what you want better than you. One of the things I love about music and artistry is that I don't need anyone's permission to do it. I don't need anyone's permission to do it. I just do it. And I like having that freedom. So when it comes to that freedom of artistic expression, just make sure it's what you want and plan it out. What I often do when I'm writing songs and creating music, especially with albums, I tend to write down and jot down ideas as I go, even if it's like music video ideas or concepts or themes, or interpreting what these lyrics mean or what this song means in that moment. I keep track of all of those things. So I make sure as I go along, once I get to finishing the music, I already know, yes, this is how this is going to look. This is the setting it's going to be in. This is how I want it to be conveyed to my audience. When I came up with While You Were Sleeping, originally was not going to be a full-length album. It was just going to be an EP. But then I decided to go ahead and make it a full-length album, because I was like, I need to put out a full-length project so people can hear a full body of work. And this was when Chicago violence was like at its height. It was huge. And it was huge in Inglewood, which is the neighborhood I came from. And around that time, I was doing ministry there with my husband, like a lot of street evangelism and building with families and youth. And at the time, I'm like, man, there are churches. I'm a part of the church, a part of the Christian church, the church at large, the body of Christ. There are churches on every corner in a lot of these neighborhoods where a lot of this is happening. And why isn't there any engagement with, believers being salt and light and really pouring into families and people in these communities? Because, a lot of these things are like right at your doorstep, and it's like, how can you ignore that? And so While You Were Sleeping was a wake-up call for me, because again, I made so many excuses for my talent, being in depression, fear, being afraid people won't like it or they won't think it's good enough. So I was really asleep to the fact, like, God gave me this gift, and if he gave me this gift, he's going to provide everything I need. And every song kind of touches on that, with just this idea of being asleep and God waking from sleep, or just as a believer rousing yourself for action to mobilize. And I feel like artists have to do that when it comes to our art and our music and what we want to put out. But when it comes to the church, it's also a message to the church and to the world who is asleep, that there is a God that one day, like, we'll have to stand before and give an account to. And this life is a vapor. It's so short, and we need to learn the lessons we need to learn. And, the Bible says, when you hear the voice of God, don't harden your heart, because God calls to all of us in the beauty of creation and the seasons changing. But, man, we suppress the truth and unrighteousness. And so there is a sleep that is happening. So it's kind of like, the logo, if you paid attention, I put it on a lot of my concerts and material. Is like the hands. So it kind of stands, the X's are on my hands. It stands for like death and extinction. Like, I am a believer there's a dying world around me. And either like I'm like this because I saw something that I want to unsee, or I'm intentionally like just walking blind. Like, I don't want to see it. I'm ignoring it. So it stands for that person, like, in both ways, that needs to wake from sleep. And so for me, the project really speaks to, man, getting out of this place. Because obviously the person has eyes underneath there, you know what I'm saying? But it's just like, you're either intentionally just trying not to see, or you saw something that you don't want to confront. And for me, that was like putting out the music and having confidence in that. So the project really represents that, and I wanted it to serve as encouragement for a lot of indie artists. Like, I made do with what I had. I didn't have a lot of money starting out with this project, but I worked and I saved, and God provided, and I was able to put it out, and I got a lot of good feedback from it. So I think when I think of that logo and the project, I just pray it serves as encouragement. Like, I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I'm going to sing. I'm going to do it well enough to, put it on a project and people enjoy it. So I think the project just means so much. And I'm glad that this was like my first project, like the debut album, because I think it gave people a taste of it. Because the next rap project, I'm already writing it. I've already started recording the drafts for it. It's going to be drastically different. It's a complete different side of me. So I'm calling it my street album.
Okay.
It's definitely a street album. It's hard. It's street. And it is going to be my coming of age story and like very, very hip hop. So a lot of the musical pockets you heard on this project, it won't be a lot of that. It's just a lot like a hard kind of street album, because it's going to tell the story of growing up on Emmett Till Road, and it was hard and it was street, and there was a lot, kind of happening. So I'm really looking forward to presenting that and putting that out. And then right now I'm executive producing a gospel album. My roots are in gospel music. Super excited about that. So I'm about to put out a gospel project next year. Working on it with two of my really good friends. So I'm super excited about that, because that's a totally different space from CHH and from rap, gospel music. So those are things that are on the table and getting ready to come out.
Hope you enjoyed this episode with my girl Aasha Marie. Be sure to check out her debut album, While You Were Sleeping, available on all the platforms, also for purchase. Also check out her YouTube channel. She just released a really dope animated visual for the story of Inglewood. It's a must-see, especially if you're from Chicago or if you love Chicago. And her socials are right on the screen. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment below, like this video, and consider subscribing, because I'm going to be right back next week for a new episode. You don't want to miss it. Thanks again for tuning in to the Personal Pizza Party Show. I'll see you later.
Don't look at me, look at my master. I'm looking dapper, you should see my before and after. You dig it? Don't look at me, look at my master. I'm looking dapper, you should see my before and after.
That was Aasha on the mic. Shot sound sugar got the sugar. What? Okay.